Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Michael Kapr, I'm the CTO of Billigence. We are a BI consultancy. We started in Australia about 10 years ago, and today we cover Australia, Asia, and also Europe. So today the topic of presentation will be to share with you my ideas and some of the industry trends regarding data sharing, and particularly on very interesting cloud data warehousing platform called Snowflake. So let me start sharing my presentation deck and then hopefully show you some very interesting concept directly in the Snowflake platform. And of course, at the end, let's hear questions. Please feel free even throughout the presentation to ask questions. We'll have time to answer those. So with that, let me share my screen. So Snowflake, I thought today I prefer to start giving you a high-level overview of Snowflake for those who are not really familiar with the that particular cloud computing and data warehousing platform. What's really happening and for most of our clients is that no longer people worry about sending data to cloud. So what we see really right across the board, whether it's in banking, telco, retail, here, overseas, the data in the cloud is really today's standards, and a lot of the companies trying to offload their on-premise data stores into cloud. So really a big question is, how do you share, whether you should share, or what can you gain from sharing data in the cloud, and of course amongst the cloud participants. As you can imagine, the data is a critical value, has critical value for every company. So we're doing a lot of work, not just in data warehousing, but also data governance. And that's the very first question, what we get asked: how do we manage this critical asset? So not only companies struggle with understanding what they have, but of course, if they need to exchange data, if they want to do it securely, following all the protocols and avoiding any inherent risk with sharing the data outside their organization. However, there's a huge benefit of being able to do so. Of course, you need to do it using special arrangements with third parties, whether they're internal or external. Of course, today's processes are very cumbersome and time consuming. There's a lot of exporting, sending, SFTP location involved in transferring data securely. So as a result, it is really not that practical. I suppose the large enterprises have such a wealth of data that they definitely think about how can we leverage that for, let's say, better cooperation with their partners, but also perhaps to achieve monetization efforts, because the data has enormous value for potential customers. So the limited or challenging conditions today really preventing a much easier method of sharing data today with the existing technologies. Just to give you an idea and picture of what is typically involved, of course, there's a lot of different data sources, as we all know, and some of the data is already stored on the web and in the cloud, but a lot of it is still in transactional databases available just in on-premise deployments. Of course, traditional approach today with just having the data is to extract, transform, and load into your traditional data warehouse, which is typically still on-premise. or potentially if the company's invested in data lake or Hadoop, obviously sending it there, but then still, making it available through data marts to people to consume. And here's where the problem lies. We can only process through traditional methods something which is limited, because we obviously data warehouse on premise is very limited to how much data can you process. That's why you would typically invest in Hadoop. But once you have it in there, it's pre-modeled, and it's really difficult to have a consistent approach to sharing it either within an organization or with external partners, apart from, again, exporting it, sending the structure, which quite often change, to the potential third party, and then having to import it, reprocess, and bring to their consumers through the same steps. So the process is really convoluted. So if you look at the modern data landscape, like a cloud data architecture, which Snowflake provides, there's obvious benefits straight away. Of course, you can do both ETL or ELT to get data in, but of course, you have a lot better flexibility to distribute data around for specific purposes by having virtual warehouses within Snowflake, which I will talk about a bit later, to have specific performance and specific use for the data, really scalable and without limitations. So for those who didn't hear about Snowflake, for me, the three key aspects which really separate it from traditional on-premise warehouse as well as cloud offerings from the other providers, whether it's Google, Amazon, or Azure, is the clear separation of storage from compute. What that really means is that people in marketing, finance, and other departments can actually run their own queries, their own performance, manage and control for achieving exactly what they want with the data set, which is so stored centrally within Snowflake, without affecting the others. Typically, that's a problem with on-premise deployment of data warehouse, where if I load a lot of data, I will have a queue for example, some very complex queries and vice versa. So that's really important factor within Snowflake architecture, which really allows you to then leverage the Snowflake architecture for better data sharing. The second thing, it's almost instantaneous resize. So you can have as many virtual warehouses, the compute instances, as you like, and you can monitor the usage, but of course you can ramp it up within seconds and you can shut it down within seconds. So there's no limitation on how many of these. We typically see separate virtual warehouses just for loading data, for processing of data, for data science, modeling, and of course, for data sharing. Now, as I mentioned before, the multiple cluster architecture allows you to access data without contention. So the data is stored once, but I can access it multiple times concurrently, reading it or querying it at the same time without affecting the performance, which is enormous benefit. So with that, let's just focus on what can we do to better share data today. So this slide really introduced the concept of data providers and data consumers. Now, in the context of large organization, data providers could be BI teams, which may sit in IT, or perhaps even BI teams within the business who have some really good skills to work with the data, create useful insights or really useful curated data sets, which they would like to share. But today they are limited as far as how to give it, let's say, other departments, let's say between HR or finance or marketing and sales. Now, data consumers, it's really the people who would benefit from knowing that the data sets exist and having really simple way of accessing it. Okay, what Snowflake does is a couple really important things. Once you share data through Snowflake Data Exchange, it's always live. There is no need to trying to find out when was the last file which was shared with us and so forth. The minute you get access as a data consumer, it's always live. Secondly, as a data provider, you never send data. It's queried on your platform, and with the Snowflake scalability, you are actually enabling the data consumers to use for example, your instance to get the data for themselves, but you're not actually duplicating data ever. The next thing is really that it's really the minute you actually onboard it as a data consumer, the data is there for you to query and perhaps blend with some other interesting data sets you have, and then present them to your customers. So what happens within Snowflake? As you can see on the left hand side, you have a very traditional approach to data sharing. You have data sources, you have to extract, you have to transform and deliver, and you have to do it really twice, because once you send the resultant data sets to your customers or to third party or other consumers within the organization, they have to understand what's in it, they have to reprocess it and pull it to their own data mart. On the Snowflake side, it is really much simpler. As I mentioned, you can create, and I will demonstrate it later, you can create a view of the data you already have in one place and filter it exactly to the specification of the potential consumer, be it internal or external, and you can onboard them to your instance. And there's a couple of scenarios which I'll talk about later, and they get direct access to it, and it's something which they're very familiar, because it's just looks like a table view which they're very familiar with, and they can simply just point their visualization tools or other methods of working with the data directly to the chair which is provided to them. So it's much simpler. You eliminate large number of steps which today really, I believe, prevent a more efficient data sharing. So what are the potential benefits? I can certainly see that you would be able to reduce your time to market. So if your data science team has something really valuable and they work on a data product, you can simply enter agreement with potential customers who are interested in your data, and you can anonymize the data as you would normally do, but you just expose it to them through the marketplace. And that can happen both inside organization as a private data exchange, as well as externally, where you would publish your listings to the public marketplace, where you actually can find today already a lot of companies who provide data to you just to try, and potentially, if you're interested in, to enter in a specific agreement where you can start exchanging data. I believe even within the organization, and that's my own personal experience, is that sometimes people develop really interesting logic, something which will be very useful to the other parts of the business, and it's just not really readily available for others to consume. So imagine if you create really good segmentation of customers, and perhaps you have it in sales, but marketing doesn't know about it, doesn't have access to it. What typically happens is that people would ask you to send them data, and it's distributed through emails, Excels, and so forth. Or if it's more sophisticated, of course, there's some transfer going on. But again, is how do you consistently do this? How do you keep the flow of data going if the source changes? I think that's really where the concept of data exchange from Snowflake really shines, because it's always live and you never copy data. So you ensure for consumers that they always see the latest data, and they don't even have to think about it. Now, we've been in situations where, let's say, large insurer would have a lot of partners in the marketplace, and they have one large data set inside a company, but they, of course, they need their partners either to give them data or actually share data out. So how do you ensure that this is done securely and with the least amount of effort? Now, the same thing applies here, and I will demonstrate it through the demo. Finally, I guess the biggest concern is, what if I want to stop sharing my data? What can I do? Okay, now Snowflake has really good controls around this. You can manage your membership. You can grant and revoke access to data through the standard or personalized listings. Of course, you can audit the data usage, which I think is really important, not only for understanding what's happening to your data, but also perhaps your monetization efforts. If you know how much data they consume, you can obviously create flexible pricing for specific customers. And finally, applying security controls. As I said, anonymization, managing the privacy, the PII aspects of data, and so forth. So with that, let's just let's start looking at the system to give you a flavor of what it could look like. So I'm gonna have 3 typical scenarios. One will be, how do you shop for available data sets in the Snowflake public marketplace? The second one will be, how can you prepare your own data for sharing across the organization? And finally, how can you then extend the sharing by placing data to the public marketplace and obviously achieve some monetization or industry-based sharing? So with that, I will switch over to my Snowflake instance. What you see here is a standard UI, which is provided by Snowflake. So Snowflake is cloud-based, built for cloud. So this is the way how you see data. You have obviously your access to all your databases and user accounts. And for people who work with Teradata, Oracle, or traditional SQL-based systems, this would be very familiar environment, and it's quite intuitive. Now, as you can see, I'm using, this is our partner. Billigence is a Snowflake partner. So we are involved in implementation a lot of the Snowflake instances for our clients. And as such, we have access to Snowflake partner instance. And we chose to have it, this particular instance is based in Azure, in Australia. It's worth mentioning that Snowflake is really agnostic to the cloud. So you can run it on Azure, you can run it on AWS, but of course, the plans are to release Snowflake on Google platform in Australia. It's already available elsewhere in the world, so you always have to check for the region availability. But I guess Snowflake works exactly the same on any of the platforms, so there's possibility to migrate from AWS to Azure and vice versa, and of course with Google. So for a strategic decisioning about the platforms you're going to use for your cloud data architectures, Snowflake gives you really independence of the platform. Of course, we see people committing to vertically, let's say, the whole Azure stack or Google stack and so forth, but Snowflake can really run across and very consistently the same experience. And in fact, it can be one of the strengths of having the ability to replicate your data sets from one provider to another one as your backup strategy or similar intentions. So back to the environment. So what I have here is my instance. As I said, I have a number of data sets, tables and views, schemas as you would normally. But today I really want to look at what is available for data sets I can use for my own insights, or perhaps enriching my own internal data. So in this case, what you do is you actually go to Data Marketplace. As you can see, it's very intuitive, and I'm just going to launch the interface for the public facing data exchange, which is hosted on Snowflake. So as I was explaining the concept of consumers and providers, what you see here is a listing categorized by different, different industries or different asset types or data asset types, where companies decided to share their own data through the public exchange, and they're obviously available for search. And there's a different nature of the data. Some of it is very useful because it's shared for free. So for example, there will be COVID data sets and the likes, but also there will be listings which are as a freemium model, or basically you have to pay for them. So in this case, I want to see some movement of customers across some Starbucks location, which I know already exists. So there you go. I started, I'm actually looking at foot traffic patterns of people who visit Starbucks in US. So what you see here is the data provider, being Snowflake user, deciding to publish the listing of their data product onto the public exchange, public marketplace. And it's quite well structured. You provide information. What is the data about? How is it available? Typically, the data providers would actually show what's the typical way to work with the data. And you typically get a sample just to confirm that it's really valuable to you, and you want to then agree on the conditions how to use it. Of course, you can provide extra level of detail, who they should contact, how to get help, and so forth. Yeah, so very intuitive. It's really a shopping basket for data, the way I see it. And in this case, I already subscribed to this data set. So let me just give you an example. Let's say something else. So for example, I will be interested in this data set here. As you can see, different provider, different information, but I need to request the data. Depending how the process is executed by the providers, in some cases it's almost instantaneous. In other cases, you obviously would have to agree the conditions and so in some agreement how to use the data. So if as I said, I already have the data set subscribed in my instance. So if I go back to my Snowflake, as you can see, this is the data set I subscribed to, because it's available as a sample for free. And with that, you see it as any data set you would already have on your platform. You get your information schema, views, and within the public schema, you have the tables available. So for example, if I look at the table patterns, I can straight away preview the data, and I can even go and run the query, which was provided as a sample. When I run that, I'm actually not moving data to my Snowflake platform. As I mentioned before, the data still sits with the provider of this particular data set, and I'm just querying it through the Snowflake architecture, which is very good at enabling this direct connection without extracting the data, losing sight of the data, dealing with different structures and so forth, the way how I need to process it again into my thing. So it's really straight away available for you, and you can query it. Now, the important thing is once you have the data provider may decide that they stop it. So on their end, it's just simply, stopping you from using it, or of course they see how much of data I use and so forth. So the monitoring part is very powerful. So I have decided that, this is very interesting. I can of course blend the same data set with my customer data. I maybe find which ones of my customers are visiting the coffee shops across the country. Of course, I would have to know and have the right identifier. So it really depends what the agreement is, whether it's something which is anonymized or not. But you can really start, at least from demographic perspective, start seeing, where are the clusters of your potential customers, and start seeing it. Now, simply to use the data is I have example here on my Tableau instance as a visualization tool. So here we have our data exchange example, and what you see here is the representation of data which I essentially purchase or source from external party, and now I can really get access to it straight away. As you can see, it really performs. So I don't have to really do much with the data, and being able to use it straight away. So and it's live, so I can query the data. I can really start presenting it to my internal audience or external audience. So with that, that covered the first scenario which I was talking about, which is I went to the public exchange where different data providers give access to their data sets under different conditions. I can find it. If I'm interested, I would typically first look at the sample, and if it's something I really want to use further, I can then continue working with it and have agreement how to use the data on an ongoing basis. So with that scenario covered, now it's time to look at the second scenario, which is, let's say I have some customer data which could be of interest to either internal customers or external third parties. So what typically happens, as I was showing on the previous slide on the modern architecture, I may have internal system which would be pumping data into my Azure Blob storage, or for that matter into S3 buckets in AWS or Google storage, depending what my data pipeline for this data is. So as you can see, it may be we then stage the data depending what format it is, and if you look at it, we have full set of customer details. Some of it could quite likely be private, so we have some hashing going on with the addresses and so forth to make sure that we adhere to the standards, but it really depends how you work with the data. Now what you do, obviously creating, bringing data in, that's your very traditional process. So you have data engineers who would create the structures to bring data in, or you already have it. And so to then start using Snowflake to share data better is just a matter of creating a view on the data. In this case, we've created data because let's say our potential customer or potential user wants to see all the data which would be specifically only interested in household category. Yeah, so we have the full data set here in our test DB, and we have the sample view available here just to demonstrate it. So the customer has the full data set, and we created a view which shows you just a limited view of the data. So you restrict certain columns, you may restrict certain rows, as what we did here, because we excluded all the other categories, and we really just looking at few columns and only the one category. Okay, and of course, the other customers may be interested in seeing more or seeing different categories, so you can create different views for different customers. Now, that's all you need to do to be ready to start using data exchange within Snowflake. The way to do it is you go to shares. As you can see, I've got a couple things going on here already. So the inbound, which is what did I subscribe to? I've already shown you the Starbucks sample where you get the data from external provider, and until they stop making available, you have always access to it. But what we're doing now is we becoming data provider and creating a new share of the data. The way to do it, you need to give Shannon the name, you need to select the database, tables and views you want to share, and any particular comments, and that's all, and then you publish it. So as you can see, we already have here one published outbound. So what this is, it's the view which I've created. So the customer list was in database called testdb. We shared it with everybody. At the moment, you can restrict that, and we selected the view, and you can select more, which you would be sharing with. So I could, for example, share the particular table. I can show that to see how quickly that works. So at the moment, it's just the view, and so the remaining bit is whom do you share with, and for that Snowflake provides reader accounts. Now here's important fact for sharing. There's two methods of sharing. What I'm showing you first is that I create a reader account for someone to come in and only get access to data I shared, but they are sharing it, they're getting access on my infrastructure. So any querying of the data will be paid for by me for them using my virtual warehouse, one of the instances within Snowflake, which I've dedicated to this, but I have total control over who do I give access to. I can monitor how many times did they come in, how much data they consume. So I can actually calculate even for internal recharging. So this will be the case. I could create an account for let's say marketing to come in and get a segmented list of customers they can approach. I could actually do internal recharging to this particular team, giving them the really simple way to then push data to their, let's say, a CRM system, or for follow-up and so forth. So I've created this this instance here, and I'll just demonstrate for you is what do they see. Remember, when I'm in my instance, I see a lot of different data. What I've done now is I've created a share. I'm gonna give slice of my whole Snowflake instance with specific data to one external party. So here's the reader account. So what you see here is a separate link from mine where the data is hosted specifically for this customer, and call it partner, third party, potential customers. And I've created an account called DXTest, which now you as a customer logged into my instance of Snowflake, but you only see the one particular view. As you can see, it's the information, the 4 columns I've had in the specific view. Okay, and now when I run a query, I only see the data as it's been. I'm essentially now running query on the data provider instance, the original Billigence partner instance, and I can use the data. And again, I could go to Tableau, and I could create a new workbook. I could just connect to the new instance, pick the Snowflake connector, enter my instance details. I can choose the method, how I authenticate, in this case, username and password. And log in. And I can start immediately using the data as soon as I get authenticating. Okay. Sorry, I have to select the data source as the warehouse, specific warehouse, and there should be just one view available in that, which is the customers. This is the published view as I named it, which is the view, and just drag it. And with that, I should be able to say, look at the customers and look at the balance in this case. And now I'm directly querying the data which were given to me by the sorry, this is something wrong here. As you can see, I'm not the expert in Tableau, but you get the gist, yeah? So I could immediately get the data by querying directly from this Tableau report directly to Snowflake, which is to the instance which was given me. And if I would change the data, if I would be having more data flowing into my platform, the view would pick it up, and it's all live without ever moving data. So you can have a consistent reporting running for your partners on the data which sit on your platform. You control what you share with them, how long you share it for, you can monitor it, and so forth. So that should demonstrate the ability to really provide additional value to having really interesting data sets, or having a really good foundation for monetization efforts. And that is the last part of my presentation, whereby I'd like to show you how do we define our listing. Okay. So in our data marketplace, we can define exchange. So in this case, we name it Billigence Data Exchange, and I can list different data sets. And as I mentioned before, you give it a name, description, what is the data set about, what's typical query. If they want to just sample the data, we will of course upload the documentation, how to work with the data set, how often it's refreshed, any help once they access the data on a regular basis, how they can get help, and so forth. Obviously, any legal, if you still need to enter into legal agreement, how to use the data, and so forth. But that's really what it is. So, and again, what it is just the view which we've provided to a reader account, but in this case we've just shared it through the public exchange. So so it's the one share, just available through our data exchange, and you can simply start thinking about the really interesting data sets which could be either available in general to industry for free, but of course, in a lot of the discussions we are in, there's a lot of teams who already create data products, and a lot of the data scientists working on enriching the data and thinking about how they can package data to provide them to the marketplace and make them available to customers. And today they just go through a very convoluted process of running the queries, exporting the data, moving into a secure share, typically through SFTP. And at the end, they have to give access to external party. They have to come in, they have to bring data to their site, load it into their staging, pre-process it, create something useful with it, and then only push it either to, let's say, their visualization tool, or blend it with their data to use it for their own purposes. So Snowflake really eliminates all that overhead with how can you securely share data. And I would highlight two really key things: is it's always live, and you're not moving the data, which I think is really important, because the minute you're creating constant data sets, you lose track of the data, and it's really difficult to kind of audit that process. So with that, I think we have 15 minutes left. So let me just finish off with go back to my presentation and finish off with kind of final thought with some example, which I think will be really, really useful. We do some work for government with different agencies, and we see how difficult it is to actually enable a real sharing of really useful data sets. Let's say between what could be a transport agency, or what could be perhaps health and finance, treasury, and so forth. Yeah, there's a lot of demand to do a modeling on data set, which is obviously managed and available in one agency, but it will be really, really useful for modeling in somewhere else across the board of different agencies, let's say within local government. So what you see here is, so imagine perhaps you could have either within each agency, you could have a Snowflake, their own Snowflake instance, or you could even have a dedicated local government Snowflake organization as an instance, which is dedicated to being the placeholder for really useful assets. There will be some benefits with that. Of course, it will have to have proper ownership, and I would say critical element of that will be the cataloging of the data set. So as data being brought in, you will really need to catalog it well and have proper data governance over who owns the data from the definition perspective, but also from the quality and so forth, all the typical aspects of data governance. Now, once you would have so-called master Snowflake account, you would be able to create data shares, okay, and publish them. As you could see, what I was demonstrating there, you could have different exchanges, which could be addressing the needs for totally open data, which exists across government today. There's open data sets you can access today and download, but typically it's published like an Excel spreadsheet you download. So imagine if you could just have live data, and you don't have to worry if it's in the future updated, you will get direct access to live data. And you can have different listings with also perhaps filtering for some data. You would be able to create control over different access levels, because we work in Queensland government, but also New South Wales government. They typically have 3 or 4 levels of classification for their different data sets, and some of them are obviously only internal, some of them are shared inter-agencies, and some of it is open to the public. Yeah, so you'll be able to create that fabric quite easily, and vice versa. Not only this master account will be able to then have a private data exchange which would facilitate other agencies contributing to the wealth of data being available across agencies. So it wouldn't be just one master, but you could actually have, other agencies using the same mechanisms to share their interesting data sets and really creating really rich private, let's say local government private data exchange. Of course, once you have that, you would just be able to extend it to the, let's say, local government public data exchange, where certain data assets would be curated to the extent that they could be available to the external parties, and it could be a source of income for the government, the way how government shares data today. But of course, I think this will be really a good channel for any open data sets which we all need sometimes to look at demographics and other very useful assets will be just really easily available and really easily then combined with perhaps your own data sets which you have in your platforms. But of course, you could just simply access it through the Snowflake and have the speed, the scalability sometimes, which is required if you deal with very large data assets. So, so with that, I think that's really the end of my presentation. As far as the content, I'd like to ask if there are any questions and perhaps have some time to answer. So I think I see one question there. How shall I talk to perhaps my manager with really understanding how this works and how this could really work in our organization? So look, my advice here would be to it's very easy to actually get trial instance of Snowflake. Of course, you can approach partners like ourselves. You can, of course, create your own instance as a trial version of Snowflake and really start playing with the concepts there and really understand how it would work. But I think the key thing is will be identifying the use case, which perhaps you have already existing data products where there's a lot of steps involved and it's really cumbersome the way how you exchange data, and with that you would be able to really demonstrate to your organization how much easier this is and how much control and how much potential this is. One thing I forgot to mention is to actually really stress out that Snowflake, as the platform grows, there's going to be more and more really interesting assets, and Snowflake really supports that. So, we've been in discussions where we brought Snowflake to the party with our large global customer who has a lot of data across different industries, and they will work with them to see how they can assist even promoting the data sets they have, to actually help the uptake of demand for it. So that could be one particular thing. Let me just look at other questions here. What will be the biggest pull for an organization to move from traditional data warehouse to Snowflake? Look, I see it really clearly. I've been in a few instances offloading existing data warehouse first and foremost to something like Hadoop, and it was just really, really hard. And because offload was easy, but actually enable like really good analytical engine, which is scalable over Hadoop was just almost impossible. So I would say if you today have issues where you constantly wait for, let's say, your ETL process to finish before you can query data, or if you're really hitting peaks with your existing data warehouse that 1,000 people or a large number of people run the same report, and therefore it's just you reaching those peaks of your capacity, Snowflake can automatically scale and distribute over multiple clusters. So plus the advantage of Snowflake is if you have 1,000 people running the same large report, UK-only ones, and the rest is for free. Yeah, so you want it's pre-cached, and the other 999 people would actually get access to it. So if you have constant issues with peak performance, and you therefore have to pay for a lot of extra capacity, both from hardware and obviously storage perspective, then Snowflake would be really good use case. What else? Could you share more about the usage of Snowflake for heterogeneous multiomics data integration? I'm a little bit lost here what multiomics means, but if you're talking about distributing the parallel processing, absolutely, you could spin. I'm trying to answer, I don't know if it's the right answer for you, but for example, when we're doing a large telco in UK currently, we actually have 13 virtual warehouses as our standard for different types of loads, and you can pick extra small, or you can pick triple extra large instance depending on the use, and really it's up to you to decide whether you want to pay for something to run 5 minutes and you pay premium for it, or you actually okay to run for 5 hours with extra small. And of course you can set up the virtual warehouses really easily to scale up to certain limits, so you don't have to sit there. So one thing with Snowflake is almost zero maintenance. You can just set it up, and then optimization, you don't have to worry about indexing and so forth. You know, it really scales up automatically, and it's very fast. So some of the issues which I've experienced, like with Redshift, was that, you know, it wasn't really automatic. You still have to stand up machines and split and run them in parallel. So Snowflake deals with that really well. I think that's really it. Hang on. What pitfalls should be aware when moving from on-premise to cloud data warehouse? Look, the big question is how complex, and people worry about. Last 10 years, we've built really good ETL jobs, and we have very complex data model. Okay, and that's really where people are really scared. Okay, they don't want to touch it because it sort of runs, but they feel there's a huge risk. Yeah, so the pitfall could be, I think, expectation is that you're gonna get exactly the same thing, that you just want to replicate what you have on premise. I think there will be missed opportunities. So pitfall is that people just want exactly the same thing, but Snowflake was built for cloud, in the cloud, and can really do things a lot better. Yeah, so I think you really need to focus on the things you can achieve way better than on your traditional on-premise, rather than trying to replicate exactly what you have. And I'm talking about how you can, for example, stage data really easily. You can probably reduce the number of levels you have within your warehouse. And also one thing I really like about Snowflake is, you know, imagine every time you need to go to production with some new release, and you have to copy, let's say, 3 months or 1 year of data to your pre-production system. In Snowflake, it's a matter of within seconds, you have copy of your entire production. You can run your new ETL process against it, and then just retire when you finish with it. So you're not physically cloning data. So there's no issue, oh, I haven't got enough space in my pre-production system. So really, I would say pitfall could be trying to match what you do today to kind of doing it in the cloud, but you have to really rethink it, what you want to get out of it. Have experience with a bulk migration to Snowflake that is 30 terabytes? Absolutely. In fact, we processing two I'm just trying to two terabytes per hour. We doing some loadings, currently loading network data for telco, and they with a kind of invent of 5G, there's a lot more data. We're processing huge amounts of data per hour. And look, there's ways to make it. And I've seen we actually have the metrics. What was the largest instance ever migrated? And one thing I would mention as well is Snowflake has really good tool which would actually run on your existing data warehouse, whether it's SQL, Oracle, Teradata, and the likes. And it would actually tell you the probability of migrating your code one for one. So whether it's 80%, 90%, and so forth. So that's actually works really well. But I would certainly not be really worried about bulk migration. And it's of course question of the first load, how to go about that. But we could help with that. Yeah, definitely can be done. I think that's pretty much it. So how are we for time? So we got 3 minutes. So that's all good. So unless there is any more questions, I would say thank you very much for joining. I very much enjoyed being able to share this with you. I think data sharing is a huge topic, huge potential, and every time I talk to CFO, they understand how much money is spent on just controlling and maintaining data and having them available for internal insights, how they measure their performance. But they're all thinking about, can we somehow, leverage data to monetize them? So the Snowflake would not only give you performance in your analytical space, and I think really simplify the way how you do analytics, which I guess it's first kind of goal. But once you have it, there's so much more you can do with it, whether it's data apps on top of it, integrations, but also just baked in really good data exchange. I don't know if anyone ever been involved in understanding how, for example, Data Republic works and other kind of attempts to do good data exchange, public data exchange. It is very complicated compared with Snowflake. I think they're really onto something here, so I will encourage you to try that. So with that, thank you again. It's great that you could join us, and please follow us. We'll have more to share, and even if you have any ideas for topics, please let us know, and we can schedule something next year. Very much we'd like to share with you our experience and what we see, the trends we see in the marketplace. So thank you again, and have a good day.